The words cut through the air like a blade. "Come on, deaf girl. Show us what you got." It was not said with kindness. It was not said with respect. It was a dare, sharpened by arrogance and thrown into a room full of students and parents. Ethan Cole stood in the center of Iron Valley Dojo, his black belt tied proudly around his waist. The pride wasn't quiet. It was loud, dripping from every word and every gesture. He pointed across the mats, not at one of his students, but at the woman holding a mop. His voice rose louder, meant to draw attention. "I said fight me, or are you too scared and too deaf to even try?" The room grew tense. A hush settled over the crowd. Parents exchanged uneasy glances. Young students froze in place, unsure whether to laugh or to stay silent. The woman he mocked was named Lila Brown. She looked up slowly from her cleaning, water still dripping from the mop strands. For 8 long months she had moved quietly in this dojo, cleaning after hours, working without recognition, blending into the shadows as if she belonged nowhere. She had been invisible, to Ethan, to the students, to everyone. But what no one in that room knew was that Lila had chosen invisibility. She had chosen to be underestimated. She had chosen to hide. That choice was about to end. Because in less than a single minute, everything they believed about her and about strength itself was going to change forever. 2 hours earlier, Lila had arrived at Iron Valley Dojo the same way she always did. Her key slid into the back door with practiced silence. She flicked on the overhead lights one by one, filling the large space with pale brightness. The smell of sweat and determination still clung to the mats from the evening class. She moved with her usual rhythm. Vacuum first, mop second, equipment wiped down last. Simple work that paid her rent and allowed her to live without drawing attention. But while her body cleaned, her eyes absorbed. She watched the classes, night after night, as if studying them was her real job. She noticed how the older students telegraphed their movements without realizing it. She noticed how the shy kids fought against their own hesitation more than they fought against their opponents. She even noticed the small improvements Ethan gave when adjusting a stance or correcting balance. Ethan Cole was talented. At only 28, he had earned his 3rd-degree black belt. Students looked up to him. Parents trusted him with their children. But Lila also noticed something else. She saw the way he dismissed certain students too quickly, the way his impatience showed when someone failed to keep up, the jokes he cracked that weren't really jokes at all. It was in those moments that Lila's jaw tightened, and her grip on the mop grew just a little harder. That Tuesday night, the air inside the dojo shifted. Lila heard the sound of car doors slamming outside. Through the window she saw a mother walking with her son, bright-eyed, eager, signing rapidly with his hands. His name was Adam. He was 10 years old, deaf like Lila, but fearless in the way only children can be. Lila had seen him in class before. He was quick, observant, always learning through his eyes rather than his ears. His mother, Clara, guided him inside, and Lila's heart softened at the sight of their bond. Adam ran toward the mats with excitement, his energy filling the room like sunlight. But then Ethan's face changed. Not with warmth, not with welcome, but with something colder, sharper. "Mrs. White," Ethan called out, his voice already laced with authority. "I need a word with you." Clara walked forward, still smiling, her son stretching on the mats with innocent joy. "Is everything all right? Adam's been looking forward to class all week." Ethan's words that followed hit the room like ice. This may not be the best fit for him. Parents nearby stopped talking. Students glanced at each other. Lila froze with the mop in her hand. "What do you mean?" Clara asked, her voice steady, though her shoulders stiffened. "Martial arts relies on verbal instruction. Commands. Safety cues," Ethan replied. He gestured toward the other children. "He can't hear any of that." It isn't fair to him, and it's a distraction to the others. The sting of those words made Lila's chest tighten. She had seen Ethan be patient with the overweight boy who could not keep up. She had seen him encourage the shy girl who trembled when sparring. But with Adam, his patience vanished. Clara protested. "He follows the visual cues. He watches the others. He's improving every week." But Ethan's answer was cruel in its certainty. "This isn't therapy. This is real martial arts, discipline, focus, instant response. You should try a program for kids with needs." The word hung in the air like a curse. Adam, unaware, continued stretching. His movements graceful, fluid, filled with potential. Lila's grip on the mop handle tightened until her knuckles whitened. Every fiber of her being screamed against what she was hearing. She had hidden for years, swallowed her voice, chosen silence. But at that moment she knew she could not remain invisible any longer, and so she moved. The room fell still as Lila set the mop aside and stepped forward. Every eye turned toward her. Students paused. Parents leaned in. Even Adam stopped stretching, sensing the storm rising in the room. Ethan's irritation flared the moment he saw her approach.
"Can I help you with something?"
he asked, his words dripping with condescension. Lila did not answer in his way. She could not. Instead, she simply met his gaze, steady, unblinking, and shook her head slowly. The message was clear. "Excuse me." The dojo grew colder with silence, and in that silence the spark of tomorrow's battle was born. The air inside the dojo had shifted. What had begun as a normal evening class now felt like the opening of something dangerous, something unforgettable. Ethan Cole, with his spotless GI and polished black belt, stared at the cleaning woman who dared to step forward. His expression carried disbelief, irritation, and something darker, the fear of being challenged in his own kingdom. "Are you trying to tell me how to run my dojo?" His voice cracked with arrogance, echoing off the walls. Lila didn't flinch. She didn't lower her gaze. She only stood straighter, the mop no longer in her hands, her silence speaking louder than words ever could. The parents leaned closer, uneasy. Students whispered, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Adam looked up at her with confusion, his small hands hovering in mid-sign, sensing that something important was happening. Ethan scoffed, looking to the crowd for support. "Can you believe this? The cleaning lady thinks she knows better than a black belt." A few nervous chuckles escaped from students, but the laughter Ethan wanted, the chorus of approval, never came. The room wasn't with him. Not fully. Lila's calmness was unsettling. It was strength without theatrics, power without boasting, and that unnerved him more than if she had shouted back. He tried to reclaim control. He stepped closer to her, lowering his tone as if to sound reasonable, but in the silence every word carried. "Look, I get it. You see a kid struggling and you want to help. Admirable, but you don't understand what's happening here. This is not daycare. This is discipline, serious training. And you—" he gestured at her faded jeans and plain gray shirt. "You don't belong on this mat." Lila remained motionless, but something in her posture shifted. The way her feet balanced, the way her shoulders squared, the way her stillness looked less like submission and more like preparation. Ethan misread it completely. He saw weakness. The others saw something else. Then Adam, still watching, tugged at his mother's sleeve. His hands moved quickly in sign language. Clara's eyes glistened as she translated, her voice breaking. "He wants to know why everyone looks angry. He wants to know if he did something wrong." The innocence of it pierced the silence. The boy had no idea he was at the center of the storm. For just a heartbeat, guilt flickered across Ethan's face. But the weight of the watching eyes, the need to defend his pride, crushed that flicker. His expression hardened again. "This is exactly my point," he declared, sweeping his arm toward Adam. "The constant need for special treatment, the disruption to class. Other kids shouldn't have to." But his words froze mid-sentence, because Lila moved. She leaned the mop against the wall, stepped forward and placed herself between Ethan and Adam. Her presence was deliberate. Her hands spoke in fluent sign language, and Adam's worried frown blossomed into a grin. His small frame straightened. He stood taller. The boy's joy spread like a ripple across the room. Parents who had once only seen Lila as a cleaner now saw her as something else entirely. Ethan blinked. You know sign language?" Lila nodded once, his voice rose. "So you've been standing here listening to private conversations between me and parents? This whole time?" She nodded again. The dojo was electric now. Tension crackled through the air. Students shifted nervously. Parents whispered. Everyone was caught between disbelief and curiosity. Ethan's voice climbed, sharp with fury. "This is unbelievable. First you mop floors. Now you think you can question me. What's next? Challenging me to fight?" And then it happened. Lila raised her hand, pointed at herself, then pointed at the mat. The gesture was clear. The challenge had been made. The crowd gasped. Students leaned forward. Parents straightened in their seats. Ethan's jaw dropped open. "Are you insane?" You're challenging me? She nodded once, steady as stone. This is ridiculous, he shouted. The deaf cleaning lady thinks she can fight a black belt instructor. But the room's energy was no longer on his side. They weren't laughing. They weren't dismissing her. They were waiting. Something about the way she stood there, silent, firm, unflinching, shifted the balance of power. Fine, Ethan snapped, desperate to restore control. You want to do this? Then let's do it. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Full class as witnesses. His pride demanded the fight. His ego demanded her humiliation. He smirked, trying to sound confident. When I win, you leave. No more cleaning. No more interfering. You find another job, deal? Lila's eyes swept across the room, meeting the stares of parents and students alike. Then her gaze landed on Adam. The boy's wide eyes pleaded silently for her to stand tall. She nodded to him gently before turning back to Ethan. She extended her hand. A handshake. A contract. The room held its breath. Ethan grasped it hard, squeezing with unnecessary force, but when he released, he flexed his fingers in discomfort. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. The dojo had never felt heavier with expectation. That night, whispers spread like fire. Students lingered long after class. Parents gathered in clusters, their voices low with speculation. And in the back office, the dojo owner, Daniel Hayes, stepped out, drawn by the unusual energy. What's going on here? He asked, his voice carrying authority. Ryan tried to explain, twisting the story, painting himself as the one disrespected. But all Daniel saw was a woman mopping in silence, now at the center of a storm she had never asked for. And yet, when he looked into her eyes, he saw something undeniable, something he hadn't seen in years, a fighter's fire. Tomorrow night, everything would change. The dojo emptied slowly that night, but the air never cleared. Parents left whispering to each other. Students walked out with wide eyes, their imaginations already racing ahead to tomorrow. Even those who didn't understand martial arts knew they had just witnessed the start of something unforgettable. But Lila walked away as if nothing had happened. She finished her cleaning, gathered her things, and slipped out through the back door with the same quietness as every other night. Yet inside her, nothing was the same. Her apartment was small, perched above a corner diner that smelled of fried food and late-night grease. The stairs creaked as she climbed them, her body weary but her mind alive with the memory of the confrontation. Inside, the space was sparse. A couch with worn fabric, a kitchen table scarred with scratches, a single bedroom with blackout curtains. She lived with very little, but every corner of that apartment carried the weight of silence. On her refrigerator was the only picture she kept in view, Lila and her younger sister both grinning wide, both flexing their arms in a mock show of strength. Her sister's hearing aids were visible, but her expression was fearless. The photo was frozen joy, a memory that refused to fade. Her name had been Emily, and she wasn't here anymore. Lila touched the photograph the way she did every night. Not with fingers brushing casually, but with reverence, with grief, with longing. She moved to the bedroom and knelt beside the bed. From underneath, she pulled out a gym bag. It had sat untouched for 3 years, hidden away like a ghost she refused to face. The zipper stuck, but finally it gave, and inside lay relics of a life she had once lived. Hand wraps, soft and worn from years of training, a molded mouthguard, training clothes that smelled faintly of chalk and old sweat, and at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue, was a gold medal that gleamed even in the dim light. The inscription read, Tokyo 2016, Women's Judo. 37 kilograms, first place. She lifted it slowly. The weight heavy not just in metal but in memory. Lila Brown, once a champion, once a fighter who stunned the world with her precision and power. But that life had ended the day her sister Emily's motorcycle had been struck by a distracted driver. Emily had been on her way to surprise Lila at training camp. She never made it. The call had shattered Lila's life. The grief had stolen her fire. The shock had taken her hearing in full, leaving her in silence that no metal could overcome. She had packed away the metal, the wraps, the memories, and retreated into the shadows. For 3 years she had hidden. For 3 years she had chosen invisibility, until tonight. Her phone buzzed with a message. She expected nothing more than a reminder from work. Instead, it was from Clara. Thank you for standing up for Adam today.
He hasn't stopped talking about you.
You're the first adult who made him feel like he belonged. Please, whatever you're planning tomorrow, be careful. We'll be there. Lila stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed her reply with steady hands. See you at 7. She set the phone aside and reached for her old training journal. Its pages were filled with notes, techniques, and reflections from a different life. She turned to a page near the back, one she had written just before the accident. Judo is not just about throwing people. It's about using their own force against them. It's about staying calm when they lose control. Most of all, it's about protecting what matters. Her sister had scribbled something underneath in messy handwriting. My sister is the strongest person I know, not because she wins medals, but because she makes people feel safe. Lila traced the words with her finger. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt the fire return. She placed the hand wraps on her nightstand next to Emily's photo. Tomorrow she would fight, but not for pride, not for ego, not even for herself. She would fight for Adam, for every child who had ever been told they didn't belong, for the sister she had lost, and as she drifted into sleep, she whispered to the silence of her apartment, "Tomorrow, everything changes." Wednesday evening arrived like a storm everyone had felt coming. By 6 o'clock, the dojo was already crowded. Parents filled the benches that lined the walls. Students sat cross-legged on the floor, buzzing with nervous anticipation. Even children from earlier classes had returned, whispering with wide eyes about what they might witness. It was no longer just a martial arts school. Tonight, Iron Valley Dojo felt like an arena. At exactly 6:45, the back door opened. Lila Brown stepped inside. No mop, no gloves, no faded uniform of a cleaner. Instead, she carried a simple duffel bag. She wore black athletic shorts and a plain gray shirt. Her hair was tied back tight, her feet bare against the mats. She didn't walk like someone trying to remain unseen anymore. Every step was steady, every movement deliberate. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Parents leaned closer. Students straightened. They saw her differently now, not as the woman who swept their floors, but as someone who carried the quiet presence of a fighter. Ethan Cole was already on the mat, warming up with sharp, aggressive movements. His GI was spotless, his belt tied perfectly. Every gesture calculated to remind the room of his rank. His kicks cut the air. His spinning strikes drew murmurs of admiration from those too inexperienced to recognize the performance for what it was. A show meant to intimidate. Daniel Hayes, the dojo owner, stood at the edge of the mat, clipboard in hand. His expression was calm, but his eyes followed Lila carefully. He had seen fighters before. He recognized the subtle control in her posture, the balance in her step. "All right," Daniel called out, his voice steady. "Tonight we do this properly. Official rules. Witnesses present. No phones, no recordings. What happens here stays here." The room grew silent. Adam sat at the front, his mother beside him. His hands moved quickly in excited sign. His eyes locked on Lila. She paused near him, crouched low, and signed a single phrase. Whatever she said made his smile beam, his shoulders straighten with pride. "Fighters to the center," Daniel commanded. Ethan strode forward, bouncing lightly on his toes, rolling his shoulders with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Lila approached from the opposite side. Her steps were fluid, unhurried, calm. They stood 3 feet apart. The contrast was striking. Ethan tall, lean, dressed in crisp white. Lila shorter, stockier, dressed in simple workout clothes. One looked like a polished instructor. The other looked like someone with nothing left to prove, yet everything left to defend. "Standard rules," Daniel said. "No strikes to the head. No small joint locks. No reckless throws that risk serious injury. Match ends with submission, unconsciousness, or referee stoppage. Understood?" Ethan gave a curt nod. Lila bowed slightly, instinctive, respectful. "Touch hands." Ethan extended his hand with a hard grip, trying once again to dominate. Lila met it with steady calm. He flexed his fingers afterward, just as he had the night before. Though he tried to hide it, they returned to their corners. The dojo held its breath. "Begin." Ethan came forward immediately, fast and aggressive. His strategy was obvious. Overwhelm her before she found her rhythm. His punches were sharp. His kicks cut angles. He tested her, probed her defenses, looking for fear. But Lila didn't retreat, she didn't even blink. Her footwork carried her laterally, smooth and balanced. She kept her hands high in a simple guard, her body angled so that every strike missed by inches. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't reacting in panic. She was reading him. Every step he took, every punch he threw, every shift in his hips. She was already moving before his strikes could land. "Come on," Ethan shouted loud enough for the spectators. Don't just dance around, but she wasn't dancing. She was studying. She was learning. The first exchange came when Ethan threw a hard cross followed by a low kick. Lila slipped the punch with the smallest motion, caught the kick with her hands and locked around his ankle. Gasps erupted. Ethan hopped awkwardly on one foot, trapped. For a moment it looked like she could sweep him, send him crashing to the mat. But she didn't. She released his leg and stepped back, calm, composed, leaving him standing unbalanced. The room murmured. Ethan's confidence flickered, though he covered it quickly with bluster. "What was that?" he barked. "You had me and you let go." Lila didn't respond. She didn't need to. The message was clear. She wasn't here to brawl. She was here to expose him, and everyone watching felt it. The match had just begun, but already the balance of power was shifting. Ethan's arrogance was cracking, and Lila's silence was beginning to roar. Minutes passed, and the difference between them became clear. Ethan's strikes grew harder, faster, more reckless. His body strained, sweat darkened his guy, his breathing turned ragged. But Lila moved as though she had barely begun. Her shirt remained dry, her breathing calm, her balance unshaken. Every punch Ethan threw met only empty air. Every kick left him more exposed. She wasn't just avoiding him. She was dismantling him piece by piece without ever striking back. Whispers rippled through the room. Parents leaned toward each other. Students gawked in awe. "She's making him look foolish," one mother whispered. "Where did she learn to move like that?" Another replied. The whispers reached Ethan's ears. His jaw clenched. His pride screamed louder than his reason. "Enough," he roared. And this time he abandoned all technique. He lunged with wild power, throwing a haymaker so loaded with anger it could have knocked someone unconscious. But Lila had been waiting. She stepped aside, caught his arm, and in one fluid motion Ethan was airborne. His body flipped through space before crashing onto the mat. The sound of his fall shook the room, and in an instant she had him in a perfect armbar, his arm trapped, her control absolute. Gasps filled the air. Parents clapped hands over their mouths. Students froze in awe. She held him there, showing everyone how completely she controlled him. Then, just as calmly, she released his arm and stood. Ethan lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, chest heaving, his confidence shattered. When he finally scrambled up, his voice cracked with desperation. "Lucky shot," he panted. "You caught me off guard, but the room knew better." That wasn't luck. That was mastery. Lila stood tall, her face calm, her breathing steady. She hadn't come to humiliate. She had come to show. And in showing, she had already won something deeper than points on a scoreboard. Daniel Hayes, watching closely, sensed the shift. He stepped closer to the edge of the mat, ready to stop the fight if it spiraled. But Ethan wasn't done. Humiliation burned inside him. The whispers from the crowd carved at his pride. Parents weren't looking at him with respect anymore. They were looking with pity. And pity was worse than defeat. His movements grew sloppy. He charged again, fists swinging, legs kicking wildly. It was no longer martial arts. It was desperation. Lila absorbed every strike, redirecting with the smallest motion, her body flowing like water. His strength met only air. His fury met only calm. And the crowd grew uncomfortable. What had begun as anticipation now felt like something else. Watching Ethan unravel was no longer entertaining. It was painful. "This is embarrassing," someone whispered. "Why doesn't he stop?" Another said, but Lila understood. He hadn't reached bottom yet. And until he reached bottom, he couldn't rise again, so she let him fall. 8 minutes in, Ethan hurled another wild hook, all rage and no form. Lila slipped past it, letting his momentum throw him off balance. He stumbled forward, gasping, sweat dripping, eyes wild. "Fight me," he shouted, his voice cracking with fury. "Stop running. Fight me like a man." The words hit the room like poison. Parents stiffened. Students froze. Even Adam, though deaf, could read the ugliness in Ethan's face. It was no longer about technique. No longer about respect. It had become about power, about anger, about something dangerous. And in that moment, Lila moved, not away but toward him. As his fist came down, she caught his wrist. Her other hand pressed against his chest. For a moment, they stood frozen, his fist inches from her face, her hand steady over his heart. The room was silent. Time stretched. Lila's eyes locked onto his. And for the first time, Ethan saw himself through her gaze. Not a black belt, not a leader, just a man lost in anger, crumbling under the weight of his own pride. Her expression wasn't mocking. It wasn't triumphant. It was sad. It was compassionate, a quiet plea that said more than words ever could. No more. Ethan's strength broke. His fist went limp. His knees wavered. His chest heaved with sobs he could no longer hide. The fight was over. Not because someone had tapped out. Not because a referee had stopped it. But because there was nothing left to fight. Lila stepped back, gesturing toward the edge of the mat. It was finished. Ethan swayed, his shoulders shaking. His pride, his ego, his authority, all of it crumbled in front of the very people he had once commanded. And for 30 long seconds, the dojo was utterly silent. The silence held like a held breath. Ethan stood at the edge of the mat with his back to the room. His shoulders shook. He did not turn around. No one moved. No one spoke. A small figure broke the stillness. Adam stepped onto the mat. He walked with careful courage. He looked at Lila, and his hands flew with bright, fast signs. Joy poured from his face like light. Lila knelt to meet him. Her hands answered with calm grace. Whatever passed between them steadied the room. The fear softened. The tension loosened. Ethan turned at last. His eyes were red. His voice was small. I am sorry. The words reached every corner. I am sorry for tonight. I'm sorry for yesterday. I am sorry for every time I made someone feel like they did not belong. He looked at Adam. Especially you. You belong here. Daniel Hayes stepped forward. He looked from Ethan to Lila. He looked at the witnesses who had filled his school. Before we close this, we need the terms on record, he said. His tone carried fairness, not theater. What were the stakes for this match? Lila stood and signed a short sentence to Adam. Then she faced Daniel and spoke with care so her words would land. If I win, Adam stays. No more talk about special programs. No more quiet removal. He trains like everyone else. Ethan nodded before Daniel could respond. That is fair, he said. She won. He stays. A soft wave moved through the crowd. Relief. Respect. Something like pride. A tall senior student near the front broke the hush. His name was Ben. He had been quiet all evening, his mind working over details no one else had noticed. Wait, he said, voice unsteady. He took a step closer to Lila. Your grips. Your stance. That armbar. I have seen those in highlight reels. He swallowed. Tokyo, women's judo, 57 kilograms. He stared, searching her face. It was you, was it not? The room shifted again. Parents who had been ready to pull out their phones stopped themselves. Students leaned forward with their breath held tight. Lila's answer was simple. Yes. Shock slipped quickly into awe. People did not cheer. They did not need to. They understood what they had just witnessed. A former champion had been mopping their floors. A protector had been living among them in silence. Daniel's eyes warmed. Not because of the medal, because of what it now meant for his school. Lila, he said, would you consider teaching? Not as a favor, not as a symbol, as staff. We can build a program that welcomes anyone who wants to learn. We can do it right. Lila looked at Adam. He stood taller than before. His shoulders were set like a young warrior's. She looked at Clara. The mother wiped her eyes and nodded once with quiet pride. Lila turned back to Daniel. I will think about it, she said. But start tonight. Ethan stepped forward. He did not lift his chin. He did not try to take space. He stood where he belonged, as a student again. I want to learn from you, he said. If you will have me. Lila offered her hand. He took it. The room exhaled. Daniel clapped once. It was not a performance. It was a promise to begin. What happened here stays here, he said. We are a school. We protect each other. Tomorrow we write new rules for how we welcome anyone who walks through that door. Parents began to rise. Students began to buzz. But many lingered near Lila. Not for a photo, not for a story to share, but for a simple thank you. They had seen strength take a different shape. They had seen authority bow to responsibility. Clara came forward with Adam. He signed a long, excited sentence that made his whole body move. Clara translated, smiling through tears. He says you are the first grown-up who fought for him instead of against him. He wants to know if you will teach him how to be brave like you. Lila knelt again so their eyes met at the same level. You are already brave, she said. Now we learn to be strong. Ethan stood a few paces away. He watched them, hands at his sides, breathing like a man who had set a heavy stone down at last. In the place where pride had sat, something better began to grow. Not rank. Not image. Practice. Patience. Service. Ben stepped to Daniel's side. I will help, he said. We can set visual drills. We can pair partners who learn by seeing. We can fix the way we call instruction. Good, Daniel said. Write it. We start with clear signs on the walls. We add hand signals for safety calls. We train the instructors. We ask for feedback. We keep improving. The plan took shape in minutes. It did not need to be perfect. It needed to be honest. It needed to begin. Lila stood in the center of the mat once more. The place where she had been challenged now felt different. Not a spotlight, a home base. She touched her wrist where the old wraps would sit tomorrow. She touched her chest where the old ache had lived. The ache was quieter. Her eyes drifted to the doorway. For a heartbeat, she saw her sister there, Emily, grinning and fearless, raising her hands in a silly flex pose like the photo on the fridge. The grief did not vanish. It softened into purpose. It turned into a vow she could keep. Adam waved both hands in the sign for applause. Children copied him. Hands shimmered in the air like leaves in wind. No one shouted. No one needed to. Silence had given them a new language, and they used it with joy. Ethan approached one last time. What do I do first, he asked. Lila answered the way any good teacher answers. Start again, bow in. Learn to listen with your eyes. Learn to protect before you perform. We will practice until it is real. He bowed. She bowed. The class bowed with them. Families filtered out into the cool night. The city kept its rhythm. Inside the dojo, the mats were still warm where feet had moved and hearts had changed. Daniel turned off the lights one by one, the way Lila had done for months. He paused at the door and looked back. Tomorrow would not fix everything. Tomorrow would be work. But tomorrow had a different foundation. The school knew what strength meant now. Not the loud kind. The kind that holds steady. The kind that makes room. On the walk home, Lila's phone vibrated. A message from Clara. Thank you, Lila typed a simple reply. See you at practice. She climbed the stairs to her small apartment above the diner. She set the gym bag on the table and took out the hand wraps. She placed them beside Emily's photo. She did not hide them under the bed. She opened the old journal to the page she loved. Judo is not only about throws. It is about using force without cruelty. It is about staying calm when someone else cannot. It is about protecting what matters. She added a line in clean, careful print. Strength is the feeling a child has when someone makes room for them. She closed the journal and rested her hands on the cover. The room was quiet. The quiet did not feel empty. It felt earned. Tomorrow the floor would fill again. New drills. New signs. New chances. Adam would arrive early. Ethan would stand in the beginner line. Ben would bring the laminated cards for hand signals. Daniel would read the updated safety plan. Parents would watch with a different kind of trust, and Lila would tie the wraps and step onto the mat. Not as a shadow, not as a secret, as a teacher, as a fighter, as a woman who chose to protect. Sometimes the person you overlook is the one who saves the room. Sometimes the strongest sound is a quiet no that stops a fist. Sometimes a community is born in the moment when someone decides to stand between harm and the small brave hope in front of them. The dojo lights were dark now. The city hummed outside. Inside that calm, a new story had begun.